In the dusty streets of Foshan, in that humid and heavy air of 1935, one of the greatest turning points in history was about to take place. Ip Man, whom everyone thought was just an elegant fighter, was facing Jackie Chan, the representative of ambition and youth. Ip Man was going to show not only how well he fought, but also his understanding and kindness. The city of Foshan was the heart of martial arts in those days. Dozens of fighters would come to this city every 2 months to participate in tournaments, show their fights, and receive their medals. There were more fighting schools and ring halls in this city than ever before. People of all ages, from young to old, would enroll in dozens of schools every day and try to earn degrees in combat sports. And in the time left over from fighting, they would throw themselves into a tea house and critique the days there. There was one of the most preferred tea houses, which was known as the Sosh Golden Coffee Salon. There were about 40–50 people in the hall that day, the most influential names in the city, senior representatives of local kung fu schools, and a curious crowd who had heard about this secret meeting through the grapevine. In the very middle of the venue stood Ip Man, calming everything around him with his serenity. He wore his usual simple, dark-colored robe. He was showing his students the basic forms of Wing Chun. His movements were so soft, so effortless and fluid, that to an ordinary eye looking from the outside, it looked not like a martial art, but like an aesthetic meditation, a performance art. As Ip Man's hands glided through the air, it was as if he were weaving invisible silk. This elegance was his greatest strength, but for someone like Jackie, it was just a sign of weakness. Just then, the door opened with a force that strained its hinges. Entering was young Jackie, his steps shaking the ground. Jackie was a name famous at that time for specializing in northern styles, known for his speed and destructive power. He had emerged from every tournament he entered with a gold medal and was known for neutralizing his opponents in a single move. However, Jackie was not just a fighter. He was a modern figure who loved to turn fighting into a show, a display of power, and had recently appeared on opera stages and in street performances. To him, Ip Man was someone who remained in the dusty pages of the past. Jackie shouted in a voice that cut through the hum of the crowd like a knife. "Master Ip, these movements look truly great on stage, I must admit. Perhaps you could get applause in a theater play or an opera, but we are not filming a movie here. We live in a real world, in a reality where fists break bones and sweat mixes with blood." Ip Man slowly finished his movement. He lowered his hands to his sides, as if he did not want to hurt even the dust particles hanging in the air. There was neither anger nor surprise on his face. Only a deep kindness prevailed. Jackie continued, his voice becoming even more insolent, the toxic tone of arrogance permeating every word. "The appearance is impressive, yes. Maybe you can impress a few rich merchants with these acrobatic games. But these flowery movements just scatter like an illusion when they encounter a real northern punch. You are not a fighter, Ip. You are a great choreographer. You can teach people how to look elegant, but you can never teach them how to survive on those streets. This would be quite challenging for you," he said, and a sinister smile settled on his face. The whispers in the hall suddenly gave way to a graveyard silence. Even the sound of teacups hitting the saucers could no longer be heard. These words of Jackie were not just a simple criticism. They were a direct attack on the Wing Chun philosophy to which Ip Man had dedicated his entire life, on that ancient knowledge and his honor. Jackie was someone who had entered the toughest competitions for 5 years, heard the sound of bones breaking, and memorized the jarring effect a real blow creates on the body. Ip Man's narrow-angle strikes and his rapid but soft-looking hand movements seemed too polished to him. In his eyes, this was a stage art, far from the savagery of real fighting. "You are an actor, Ip," Jackie said, taking another step closer with the crowd behind him. "Perhaps even the best actor in Foshan. But you have forgotten the chasm between the moment someone comes to truly hurt you, to destroy you, and shining on stage. Your Wing Chun is no different from a house of cards that will collapse at the first blow against the storm of the north." Ip Man remained silent for a while. Perhaps he hoped he could end this argument in that limited world of words, but he saw that ambitious fire in Jackie's eyes, that destructive arrogance, an unstoppable, youthful energy. Some lessons could only be given through action. Ip Man chose the direct path and spoke in that calm voice. "Then let us test it. Jackie, now here, no rules, no referee, no pre-rehearsed choreography. Just show me what you can do." Jackie's eyes narrowed, as if he had already won a victory. He was very confident in himself. He didn't even consider the possibility that this small-built man could have a chance against him. While Ip Man had a delicate build of about 60 kilograms, Jackie was taller, broader, and a complete mass of muscle. "I wouldn't want to hurt you, master. Foshan needs you and these beautiful shows," he said mockingly. Ip Man said, in a way everyone could hear, If you knock me down here, within the time I give you, you will prove to everyone that you are right in what you said. I will declare to the world that Wing Chun is just an empty hobby, and I will leave this hall, my students, and everything I have to you. For Jackie, this offer was the opportunity of a lifetime. Both fame and absolute authority were being offered. Fine, Jackie said, taking off his jacket and throwing it aside. But let me warn you, I will not hold back. There is no mercy in my fight. Do not hold back, Yip Man said, taking a step toward the center. For the only way to see the truth is to collide with it with all your strength. The venue was quickly cleared. Tables were moved to the sides, and the spectators lined up against the walls, holding their breath. Jackie took his stance. He was almost dominating the area with that majestic, wide, and aggressive posture of the northern style. His feet were rooted to the ground like a plane tree. Ip Man, on the contrary, was as relaxed as if he were going for a walk. He had centered his weight and brought his hands to the Man Sao and Wu Sao positions, the seeking and protecting hands. He was tensioned like a bow, but from the outside, he still looked loose, still vulnerable. 3, 2, 1, and time stopped. First second, Jackie started with that famous combination that shook his opponents in tournaments and won him dozens of victories. In the blink of an eye, he threw a hard left jab, followed immediately by a destructive right hook that put his body weight behind it. However, that expected feeling of impact did not occur. Ip Man's hands did not even move from their place. With just a small redirection of his wrists, he pushed Jackie's massive power into the void. As Jackie's punch passed millimeters from Ip Man's ear and beat the air, Jackie felt his balance slightly disturbed. Third second, Jackie was surprised, but was not someone who would give up. He quickly regained his balance and this time threw a hard kick from below, aiming for the kneecap. Ip Man's leg rose suddenly, as if not with a reflex but with the speed of a thought. While blocking the kick with Bong Gurk, he simultaneously penetrated Jackie's center, with the foot resting on the ground. Before Jackie could even pull his fist back, Ip Man's open hand lightly touched Jackie's ribcage right over his heart and pulled back. Jackie froze for a moment. This was not a normal speed. The man in front of him was moving not like a human, but like a shadow, a phantom. That touch was a silent scream saying, "I could have killed you here if I wanted to." Fifth second, Jackie could no longer think rationally. Arrogance and anger had taken control. He launched into another attack with all his strength. This time, he didn't just want to hit. He wanted to take his opponent down, to crush that delicate structure by wrestling. However, no one could see exactly what happened. Ip Man's hip shifted slightly, directing Jackie's head with one hand, while controlling the pressure point on his shoulder with the other. Jackie's massive momentum was turned against him by Ip Man, much like a small rock changing the flow of a waterfall. Before Jackie even realized what was happening, he was flung by his own weight and found his face on the ground, right at the base of Ip Man's knee. Eighth second, Ip Man was right behind Jackie. His right arm was wrapped around Jackie's throat like a snake, but he wasn't squeezing. It was just there. If Ip Man applied pressure by even a knuckle's width, Jackie could have lost consciousness at that moment. Time stopped. As the lanterns on the ceiling of the hall swayed slightly, Ip Man slowly loosened his arm and pulled back. In total, only 8 seconds had passed. Jackie just stayed there, on the dusty wooden floor. His breath was so heavy it felt like his lungs would burst. But this was not physical exhaustion. It was a mental collapse. He was a champion. He was the Storm of the North. He had fought with the best masters in the bloodiest arenas. He had put everything on the line, his fastest strikes, his most secret techniques. But nothing had worked. Ip Man had not defeated him because he was stronger. Ip Man had won because he solved Jackie's every move before a signal even formed in Jackie's brain. The silence in the hall drowned out even the sounds of life outside. No one dared to speak. Jackie slowly stood up, supporting himself from the ground. His hands were shaking. He looked at Ip Man. He still stood with the same serenity, the same kindness. There was not a single wrinkle in his robe, not a single drop of sweat on his forehead. Jackie asked in a trembling and muffled voice, "I couldn't even touch you. You were there every time. You knew where my punch was going before I did, but I couldn't reach you. This can't just be speed. I don't even know what this is, what this depth is. What did I miss?" Ip Man went over to Jackie. He placed his hand gently on his shoulder, as if approaching a lost friend rather than an enemy. "You were trained for rules, Jackie. I was trained for problems," he said. Jackie blinked and looked at him. "Rules and problems. What does that mean, Master?" "Look, son," Ip Man said, with that fatherly tone in his voice. "In tournaments, you learn to gain points within a certain structure. There are referees, there are rounds, forbidden zones, and protected areas. Your mind becomes trapped within those boundaries. But in a real life, in a real problem, There is no structure. Real fighting is positioning before technique, timing before strength. Every move of yours was technically perfect, but they all hit the void. Because I wasn't interested in your strike. I was controlling the space where your strike would go. You tried to hit your opponent, but I managed my opponent's balance. Instead of the arrogance he had carried all his life, a great enlightenment appeared on Jackie's face. It was as if a curtain had been lifted, and he saw the massive ocean behind it for the first time. What about those flowery movements, those forms that look beautiful on stage? Ip Man smiled slightly. They are just a means of communication, Jackie. Real fighting is actually very efficient, very small, and ends very quickly. No one understands what happened. If I had really hit you, the crowd in this hall would have seen nothing. They would only have watched you fall. That is why we use art and aesthetics, to make that efficiency, that invisible power, visible. The principle at the core is always real, but telling that truth to someone else is art. Here, I am not just teaching my students how to fight, but a language, a form of expression. Jackie's arrogance had completely evaporated. The arrogant young man from a moment ago, who said, "I created the world," was gone. In his place came a bashful student seeking the truth. He slowly knelt, bowed his head, and whispered, "Can you teach me, master? Not just how to hit, but this wisdom, this serenity." Yip Man took Jackie by the shoulders and lifted him up. "You already know how to fight, Jackie. Your punches are already strong. But now it is time to turn that power into an art, into a teaching." After that day, Jackie left his identity as the arrogant fighter in Foshan on the wooden floor of the Golden Coffee Salon. He was no longer just an athlete chasing physical power, but had entered the path of becoming that great master who explained fighting to the world as an art, a communication, and a way of life. Those 8 seconds had not just ended a match. They had redrawn the architecture of a man's soul. Jackie had learned from Ip Man's 8-second silent lesson that fighting was not just about defeating someone. That true mastery was to show, tell, bow, and inspire. As Ip Man left the hall that evening, he left one last piece of advice in Jackie's ear. This advice would be the compass of Jackie's entire career. Mastery, son, is not just doing something very well. True mastery is being able to show why you do that thing, that deep truth within yourself, clearly and purely enough to touch someone else's soul. If you cannot heal a soul with your movements, you are just an aggressor. But if you guide someone with your movements, then you are an artist. As Jackie looked at Ip Man's receding shadow in the dim light of the hall, he was no longer an actor or just a fighter. He was now a dervish, ready to walk on that thin bridge between art and power. And Foshan, that night, had witnessed the birth of a legend, the death of an arrogance, and the victory of truth.